The topic for this presentation is all about the literature review, how to plan for that, and then also how to plan your search strategy. Don't forget to take a look at your to-do list. Make sure you're reading the chapters, additional articles that are posted in Blackboard, and then completing all of the activities that go along with this presentation. Again, take a look at the learning objectives on your own. Well, what is a literature review? Well, a literature review is a systematic review and discussion of the literature pertaining to a particular topic. The systemized nature of the process helps provide confidence in the information and lets us know that if it's followed, the information has been collected correctly. In essence, if the process is followed, we can be more confident that all of the relevant information related to the topic has been reviewed and is synthesized into the reviewed document. Therefore, the literature review can be considered a summary of all known and published information related to a particular topic. A literature review tells a story or reveals information in a way that presents a story about a topic. As with all good storytelling, a literature review includes an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, although it's not necessarily labeled that way in the literature review. Ideally, after a literature review is complete, gaps within the literature have been identified. These gaps will begin to be emerging. And it is these gaps which help identify and develop a good research question. In order to conduct a literature review, you will need to systematically review the literature. This means you will need a process, a systemized method to review, assess, organize, and present your story about the literature. The literature review will be the basis of why you are conducting the research. Therefore, it must provide a strong argument or story to support your proposed research. So what are some tips for conducting your literature review? Well, first and foremost, use the scientific literature. What does this mean? It means you need to use published, peer-reviewed scientific literature. You can't use just a website online or a non-peer-reviewed literature. It needs to be published, peer-reviewed scientific literature. There are many resources to collect this information, and we're going to talk about them in just a little bit. Another tip is to look for related or similar studies. Review the introduction and background, and look for information and references that may be helpful in your study. Glance through the methods section, as it may provide guidance for how you want to set up your study. You may also discover within the methods section specific measurement tools that you may find helpful in your research. The methods section is also important to help determine if the study is open to potential bias. So while many people glance over the methods section, it's important to kind of read through that portion of it. Skim the discussion and conclusion and decide if they're representative of the study design. Do the authors acknowledge potential biases that might have happened? And then finally, look for gaps that have been identified. Oftentimes in the conclusion or even in the discussion section, the author will come out and quite simply just say, this is a gap in the literature. It's these gaps that are the opportunity for future research, and these can help provide the basis of your study. The last tip for this section here is to really keep a list of the studies that you will have reviewed. So details on how to do this are going to be coming up. So now let's talk a little bit about how to search different sources. So what type of literature should you be reviewing? You should be reviewing two types of literature. One, primary sources, and the other are secondary sources. So you may have had this in other classes, but just as a quick review, primary sources are presentations of information collected by a researcher or a research group. This can include direct research results. It might be a review of diaries or interviews, eyewitness accounts. All of these are primary sources of information. Primary research includes study designs such as cohort studies, randomized control studies, case control studies, etc. Secondary sources are descriptions or reviews of information presented by someone else. So examples include things like systematic reviews or meta-analysis. So these are reviews which are a collection of information that has been previously presented. So take a minute to complete this handout activity that is in this week's folder. This will help you distinguish between primary and secondary sources. So you can go to the handout now, or you can complete it at the end of this particular presentation. But it is a good idea to go through that and just refresh yourself or review about the difference between primary and secondary sources. I've also posted an answer key so you can review your answers there. To conduct your research, you will need to make use of many search databases. PubMed is one example. PubMed is a free database from the National Libraries of Medicine that houses and indexes a collection of biomedical research citations. The majority of the citations in PubMed come from Medline database, which is a database covering biomedical research. There are additional citations available on PubMed that are not covered by Medline. Therefore, an extensive search of PubMed is necessary to capture all potential citations. PubMed can be very helpful in identifying resources that may be useful in your research. Be sure to read the article titled Demystifying the Search Button by McKeever et al. This article provides an excellent overview of PubMed and the database system, including Medline and non-Medline databases. Note, at the end of the article, there is a summary of the steps to assembling a master search strategy. This outline will be helpful in developing your own search strategy for your research and will be helpful in guiding your assignment on this topic. One of the best ways to become familiar with PubMed is by using the resource. There are some great short 2 to 3 minute interactive videos to help you better use this resource. These videos can walk you through the steps and allow you interactive use of the system. Click on the video icon and you will be directed to the PubMed training page. Scroll halfway down the screen to Quick Tours. Start with the Quick Tour tutorial. A longer tutorial is also available. To access the longer tutorial, click the link in the syllabus or in the to-do list of the beginning of this presentation. PubMed makes use of MESH, or M-E-S-H, medical subject headings. These headings can be used to search Medline and certainly the PubMed resources for the medical literature. These headings help refine a search and can get you to where you need to be more quickly. Click the video icon to watch a short video on how to use the MESH terms. There are other resources to use, including CINAHL database. CINAHL is a collection of resources for nursing and allied health professionals. Embase is yet another database which catalogs biomedical research. And OVID, OVID, is still yet another database that helps provide information on articles related to the biomedical and healthcare fields. When searching any database, it is important to develop a list of search terms or keywords. A best practice is to use these terms consistently across the databases so you can verify that you are systematically looking for the same information in all areas. When developing your keywords, you should consider Boolean operators. Boolean operators help connect search words together. The three basic operators are and, or, and not. And tells the database that all the words must be present. For example, in this Venn diagram, food, social media, and communication, if we type food and communication and social media, the system or the database will return all articles that include those three terms. Keep in mind that some databases automatically include and, so it is not necessary to type this term. Or tells the database that the terms must be connected. So food or communication or social media, if we use that, we are telling the database to return anything related to any one of those topics. Not tells the database to include anything that does not include that word. For example, if we said food, not communication, not social media, it would return anything related to food that did not include social media or communication. Many databases allow for filters to narrow the search. Some common filters include date ranges, languages, full text, abstracts, or etc. These can be helpful in narrowing down your search and refining what you will review. Keep in mind that your research for your literature review should be relatively current, so the date filter will be extremely helpful in reviewing current information. It is also extremely helpful to review the reference list of articles you select and even articles you don't select to see if you can find an important source of information or even an article to include in your very own literature review. This is particularly useful when reviewing systematic reviews and articles of meta-analysis. Take some time to review the databases and journals available on USJ's library resource. Start by going to the library homepage. Click on the Search the Collection link. Then click Research Database. At the top of the page, you will see a tab for different majors. Click Nutrition and Dietetics and start your search. Note, since you are likely not on campus while you're doing this, and this is your first time in the databases, you may be prompted to enter in your sign-in credentials. This would be your USJ username and password. Be sure to document your search process following the search strategy outlined by McKeever et al., as this will help you in future assignments. So now let's talk about putting all this information together and discussing the search process. Now let's review the steps in the search process. First, decide on your area of study and write your PICO statement. Remember, your PICO statement is your population, intervention, comparison, and outcome statement. From the statement, you can begin to develop your list of keywords. Step 2, develop a search strategy. Decide what databases are most appropriate for your field and topic and begin your search. Be sure to keep a list of databases that you've searched and the results from each search. Step 3. Create a reference table for your articles. As you begin to review the literature, you will want to keep a detailed list of what you've read. The easiest way to do this is to develop a spreadsheet where you'll log what you have read. A good search strategy helps to outline how you will conduct your search of the literature. When planning out your search, you need to identify the date range that you will use for your search of the literature. For example, will you search the past 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or more? Be specific on the date range that you will use. In the past, I've been specific to the month that I've searched. You will also want to develop a set of inclusion and exclusion criteria. For example, if you were searching the impact of calorie counts on menus in an adult population, you will want to include adults, but you'll want to be specific on the age range. Include adults 18 to 64 and exclude those aged less than 18 or greater than 64. Also think about the type of study that you will be looking for. Will your research focus on interventions, cohorts, cross-sectional studies, etc.? From this information, you can refine your keywords and search terms. These are the words that you will use to enter into the search fields of the databases that you're going to use to review. A sample outline for a search strategy has been included in this session's folder on Blackboard, so please take a look. As you conduct your research, it's important to create a reference or comparison table to collect information on the articles that you review. The table listed here is an example of what your version should include at minimum. You may want to create individual columns for each piece of the information so it's easier to search and cross-reference in the future. The first column or grouping of information should include your citation, as well as the study design, and this would be a quick overview of how the study was conducted, and may also assign a quality grade. We're going to be talking about quality grades and the process to do that a bit later in the semester, so we'll come back to that piece of information. The next column or grouping of information would include the study type. Is it a cross-sectional, experimental study, cohort, etc.? Don't worry if you're unsure of the different types of studies. We're going to be covering that in a bit. Also within this grouping, you would want to include the purpose of the study, the aim, and/or the research question. Within this section, I often include information on guiding theories or the framework that may have guided the study. For example, if the study is guided by social cognitive theory or the health belief model, it would be important to note this. I generally put one topic per column so I can search on the information. This helps me, for example, if I want to look at all the intervention studies that included social cognitive theory, then I would be able to easily filter that information and show it within the table. The next section includes the study population and sample size. Here, you may want to describe the sample population and include not just the sample size, but also information about age, gender, etc. If available in the methods section, also include the response rate. The column marked intervention would include an overview of the program, intervention, or experiment that was conducted. The next column marked outcomes would include information about a statistical analysis. Were paired t-tests used? Was it a correlation study? Was regression used? You want to describe the variables, include the independent or the predictor and the dependent or outcome variables. Also include information about how the variables were measured, and is the measurement a validated process or a validated tool. Finally, include a brief description of the results, including both positive and negatives. The final column would include a brief outline of the author's conclusions. You may include additional columns such as a note column for anything that isn't covered anywhere else in this reference table. So a quick note on variables. Variables are generally tied to a hypothesis or aims of the study. An independent variable is what causes a change, and a dependent variable is what is changed in a study. Also, the dependent variable must be measurable. So typically we're looking at a change in something for the dependent variable. We're looking at this dependent variable. Did it increase or decrease? Um, did it change in some way? Use the following statement to help you determine which variables are independent and which variables are dependent. The independent variable causes a change in dependent variable, and it isn't possible that the dependent variable could cause a change in the independent variable. So again, the independent variable causes a change in the dependent variable. Take a quick minute to do a knowledge check and determine the independent and dependent variables in the following. The next slide will give you the answers, but really try to do this before you click on to the next slide. All right, let's review the answers. 4. Question A. A study to examine if weight is impacted by access to healthy foods. Access to healthy foods is the independent variable, and weight, which will be what is changed, is the dependent variable. Question B. Study to examine if the new food label causes people to purchase less junk food. The independent variable is the food labeling law, and the dependent variable is how much junk food is purchased. That's going to be the item that's changed, right? So it's going to be increased or decreased. So, question C. Study to examine relationship between owning a pet and increasing activity. The independent variable is the owning the pet. That's what's going to change the dependent variable, which is what we're going to be looking for, an increase in activity. So many of you may be feeling overwhelmed and frankly scared about starting out on this adventure of a literature review. It can be overwhelming, particularly when a search result comes back with hundreds of papers. The hundreds of papers can generally be narrowed down through many different filters, and also just a quick review of the title and the abstract. Once you have narrowed the pack down, you are going to have to read the studies. I've posted an article, and yes, you're going to have to read the article, that really can help you quickly assess the information in the study. So take a couple minutes to look in this week's content folder, and you'll see an article there, The Art of Reading a Journal Article. Start putting your reference table together. Use the guidelines presented earlier in the PowerPoint as the basis for your table. Start this now, as you will need this for later assignments and ultimately your final paper. The sooner you start, the easier these assignments will be. This is where this presentation will end. Be sure to read the chapters and complete any of the assignments and activities due this week. If you have questions about anything, don't hesitate to reach out and contact me, but make it sooner rather than later, as we need to get going on to the next topic. Talk to you soon.